So today is the last day, we all know that. So we'll first spend a few minutes on, how to attend interviews, what kind of questions can you expect, how can you, prepare for the interviews better and, all of those things. And then some of you have submitted your questions in the spreadsheet that I gave you yesterday. But if you haven't done so, if you haven't provided your questions yet in the sheet, please feel free to do that while we are still discussing the main topic that leads up to answering those questions. Now, however, if you don't want to write it there, there's no problem. You can just let me know your questions when we reach the Q&A session. Now, this will be the shortest session that we've had so far in the course of this program, because clearly there's not a lot of interviews is really about each one of us individually and how we perform on the day of that exact day where the evaluation is going on. But anyways, we'll try to, as I said, talk a few things and figure a few things out, set things straight about what kind of interviews you might what kind of questions you might get, so on and so forth and all that. So QA interviews, you can actually break it down into three major categories. So, I mean, in a QA interview, you will be tested for three major skills, or three areas of expertise basically. One is clearly in your technical knowledge. So by technical knowledge, what I mean is, so when you are applying for a QA role, the expectation is that you should be very proficient at QA concepts. So the QA concepts is the number one thing that you would be tested on. The next thing would be your attitude. Now, IT teams, especially when it comes to IT teams, it doesn't matter how much you are proficient or how well you work at an individual level, but the real success of IT projects really depends on how well you work in a collaborative environment, how well can you communicate, how well can you mingle with different teams. And this is especially true for this is much more important for QAs, because we are the bearers of bad news. We are the ones who say that, hey, this is not working, this is something that we need to put together before we go ahead any further. So we are basically the ones, when you look at it from an outside point of view, we are like the speed breakers, we are like the speed bumps on the road. So it is extremely important to be able to carry that information in a constructive manner, to not take things personally. So all of these factors play a major role in being a QA. So the attitude, positive attitude, and being able to focus on what's important and not taking things personally, these are few things that are extremely crucial for us to be successful as a QA. So when a QA is interviewed, 100% you will face questions that will try to assess your attitude and the way you are going to work in a collaborative environment. And finally, of course, this is the most important skill that you should have, communication skills. Now, by communication, again, a lot of times we mistake that communication means being proficient in a language. Now, yes, language is a medium of expression, but it is the thought that counts, is what I believe. The clarity of that thought, the conviction behind, how strongly you believe in that thought, and how well and how clearly you are actually putting that thought forward, all this forms communication. So QA's communication would be like, informal communication with your team members, or there might be email communication, which is much more formal. There's also the conferences, meetings and everything, where you're expected to talk to each one of us, presenting ideas. All of this, they start. Eventually all the success of all of these areas, it depends completely on communication. So these are the three main areas that people are going to try to test you in when we are appearing for an interview. Now, if you look at this, technical expertise is just 1/3 of this, because a lot of times we concentrate on, do I need to learn Unix, do I need to learn Java, do I need to learn VB, do I need to learn this, do I need to learn that. However, all of that is definitely important. I will not deny that. Unless you are, qualified to play a certain role, like in terms of acquiring a skill set, then automatically, you're disqualifying yourself if you're not proficient with the skills that are required. But again, attitude or communication are two things that people overlook, and at communication, I mean positive communication. Exactly. So positive communication means that, see, sometimes the classic problem, I think we discussed this early also, the classic problem whenever I interview 90% of the time when I ask somebody what are the challenges you faced, they will tell you that all our bugs were getting rejected, the developers were not smart enough to figure it out. Now that is always the wrong answer, because when you say that you did not get along with somebody, that is always a red flag, and companies are not going to hire you because it takes a very little, it takes really a little bit of an effort for a kind of, for a mob to turn into a mutiny. So this is the quote one of my managers used to use. So if in a team, if one person turns negative, very easily the whole team is going to turn negative. So that sort of negative influence is what companies try to avoid. So don't ever feel that, that is a challenge that we had to overcome. Always think about how we can make our argument better and how we can, and at the end of the day, see, if you found a bug, if you want to argue that it's a valid bug, and if people are not listening, whose loss is it? At the end of the day, the product's loss. Your job is to find a bug and report it. It is very important to understand that it is not our place to tell the client or tell the company to behave in a certain way. We are never above our roles. So that is something that we all have to remember, accept, and work within the boundaries and limits that exist for every profession. So these are three skills that we are all going to be tested on. Now, when a certain thing has to be tested, it all comes in the form of questions, clearly. So in an interview, the most common type of questions can be categorized into 5 areas. One is the tell me about yourself question, or the introduction. Now, whenever you're talking to somebody, you kind of ask the basic questions. What do you do? Where are you from? So, I mean, where are you from? Where do you live? And all of these small, questions when we meet people on a daily basis. So, tell me about yourself question is slightly much more formal than that, but the intention is exactly the same. So this is kind of a deal breaker. This is kind of like an icebreaker. We are trying to figure out a way to, strike the conversation, basically. Because at the end of the day, an interview is nothing but a professional conversation with your potential employer. You have to get started somewhere. So the employer in one form or the other will ask you this question, tell me about yourself. Now this is the question that will set the set the stage or set the pattern that the rest of your interview is going to follow. So let me give you an example. Now the best way to answer this question is by starting with your name, qualification, and then start with your skill set or experience. So here you can say, hey, my name is Swati, I'm like, a BTech computer science engineer. So if you feel like not having a computer science background, you don't want to highlight your educational information, you don't have to do that. And then, you probably might want to talk about how you came across this interview. So, so-and-so person called me, we had a first level of interview, and I'm here because we are following up with the second level. So you can use that opportunity to set a context on why you're here, what happened before all of that, and coming especially to the skill set. Now here everybody is like, especially those who are new, are confused. No, what am I going to say? Like, I haven't worked anywhere before. Now the key here, as it is with the resume, is to focus more on your skills, not on your experience. So it is really up to us to highlight things and not highlight some of them. So here, do not highlight the experience if you think that that's going to work negatively against you. And when you are going ahead and giving your skill set, so this is how you could do it. I'll just give you an example. So you can say, I've been into teaching for all these years, and now I wanted to venture out into QA. So I learned the core QA processes, and I know the software testing life cycles, software development life cycles. I've worked on Agile for a little bit. All the skills that you know. So Jira, Bugzilla, so all the skills you can tell. But the important thing to note here is As I said, all the questions that will follow will be based on the answer that you give to this question. So for example, if you say simply, I know automation. So here, when you use a statement as vague as this, you are not setting the boundaries within which the interviewer can ask you questions, which means you are leaving the whole automation arena wide open for your interviewer to pick and choose any question that they might ask you about. And that is definitely going to work against you. You will have to set the boundaries of your level of expertise and make sure that you stay within them. So you can say, I'm familiar with automation. I have a theoretical understanding of automation, but I have never done it. That is something I definitely want to pursue further, but at this point of time, I'm not an expert at it. So that's how you can actually, quantify the boundaries for your skill set, not keeping it wide open. Now, in an interview, most of the times the misconception is that um, if the interviewer asks like X number of questions, you have to answer all of them right. That is not true. The real successful interview is where there are no follow-up questions or few follow-up questions. See, when I say I know automation, either, the person can ask you like, a lot of automation questions, or they can ask you, what tool do you know? How much of a proficiency do you have? How many years of experience have you had? How many projects have you worked on? So all of these are follow-up questions. So your target in an interview is to reduce that follow-up questions. And how can we reduce that follow-up questions? By actually incorporating that level of clarity from the very beginning. So always remember that don't give vague answers. Do not give answers for which you don't know the exact definitions. So always remember that in an interview, if you don't know something or if you cannot recollect something, it's okay to say so. But then, try not to just, go on and on about a concept and build on something, a foundation that's already shaky. So that's the tell me about yourself question. A quick recap. We did go a lot of it into it. I mean, we did digress a little bit, but coming back to this question, start with your name, start with your little bit about your background, and, if it helps that you give a context of why you are in an interview, you can do that. Mention your skill set in the order of your expertise. Highlight the things that you want to highlight, the things that you don't want to, quantify them appropriately. Avoid a lot of follow-up questions on this. And the best part about the tell me about yourself question is that you know it's coming. So you have the time to prep yourself on this question. I've had some of our participants write down a paragraph, send it to me, talk about it. We've gone over it, and then they have actually finalized on what they want to say. Of course, it's going to depend on the role that you're applying for, then you probably will change it. But it is to get that method, that process correct on how to, approach this question. So again, I don't recommend rehearsing and, going ahead and saying the same thing. But it's always better to prepare. See, even after all these years, when somebody asks me the tell me about yourself question, I know that I'm missing something. I just say like 2 or 3 words. In fact, in the beginning of the session also, that's something that I have that I find extremely hard to, go ahead and tell about myself, introducing myself. So this is one place where you can use that opportunity to figure out, what is it that you want to tell about yourself. How can you present the information about yourself in the best possible light? So sit down, take some time, prepare an answer for this question. Talk it out with a friend, or you could send it to me also, and we can actually, work out and figure out what works best for you. So that's the first area of your questions. And is it okay to tell a qualification not related to the profession? Absolutely. It's okay to tell a qualification that is unrelated to, testing. But in that case, you'll probably have to spend, a minute or two explaining your choice and the shift of gears in terms of, career choices. So this is the tell me about yourself question. So Raj, are you saying we have to lie about this? So which skills to So if that is your exact background, then yes, you do. I mean, there is no one set of guideline that you need to mention or you should not mention at all. It's about you, how you want to portray yourself. So there's no information. For some people, it's too much information. For some, it might be too less. If I'm an MBA and why am I going to QA? That's a choice. See, if I ask you that you've been an MBA, then why are you going for QA? Do you have an answer for that or not in your mind? You do, right? So try to find the words to explain that choice in the best light possible. No reason is bad reason. You just have to find the right words to express that reason. So if you need help, we can schedule a one-on-one session and figure that out. And Mira's question is what skills to mention specifically? Any skills. So first, I mean, of course, relevant skills to the job that you're applying. So if you're applying for a manual tester's position, so you would talk about, if you're certified, you'll talk about the certification. Otherwise, you'll talk about your expertise in software development, testing life cycles, your proficiency in the test planning phase, if you have any experience in there, if all the methodologies that you know, and then probably, if there are any tools that you know, if there are any languages that you know, so any skills that you want to highlight, so you can mention them. So this is to draw a parallel between the resume and the interview, tell me about yourself, question. All the things that you would mention in the professional summary in your resume, that might be a good reference to include in your tell me about yourself answer. So that's part one. The second area of your questions will be project related. And most specifically, the latest project. So here, if you have worked already, then it's a good idea to give them your latest project that you worked on. Otherwise, pick up one of your off-job projects, and you could just go ahead and mention that. So yeah, so here again, pick this information from your resume. So make sure that whatever you've written on your resume and whatever you're talking in your interview, they are pretty much similar, because lying on your resume is pretty much the most compromising situation that you'll find yourself in, and an interview is where all of that becomes very, very obvious. So you've written one thing on your resume and you're not able to answer about it, like 0%, you're just not able to find even one sentence to describe about whatever you've included in your resume. That is really bad. That's a red flag. It means that your interview is over right there. And if you've written something on your resume and you are not talking about it and you have no idea about it, that's again another red flag. So avoid these situations. Always avoid these situations. It's not that hard to actually match up with what you're speaking with what the resume is about. So it just needs some time, some prep ahead of time to actually figure these details. So here you will start with what the project is about. So you'll talk a little bit about AUT. So if we are talking about the Car Guruji site, I would start it this way. So this is an application. It's a web-based application. It is developed as part of the live project for the software testing helps manual testing course program, and it is pretty much similar to the Kelly's Blue Book, or I mean, of course, that's too much in scope, but this is something that tries to automate the car dealership process. So there is a view inventory option. So you'll talk a little bit about the project that you've chosen. Again, if you're working in a client-based project environment where there might be some confidential information, try to not mention the specifics and keep it in a generic way. Now, once you talk a little bit about the AUT, talk about your role. What is it that you have done? So yeah, similar to Edmund's. Thank you. So talk about the role. So what were you? You were a test engineer. You were a test lead. You were. Is it a self-assigned project, which means that you are all in one? So talk about your role. And also talk about the exact methodology or the process that this project follows. So is it agile or is it traditional waterfall? or the exact stage in which you have joined this project. So again, keep it brief. In an interview, you don't want to go on and on. See, always draw a reference on how an interview should go with any of your other conversations. Now, would you be interested if you were talking to somebody who was just going on and wouldn't even pause? You wouldn't want to even listen to them. So even in an interview, when an interviewer asks you a question, it doesn't mean that we have to like just break that dam of conversation open. You have to keep it short, you have to keep it concise, and keep it relevant. So when they're asking you about the project, we cannot talk about how the architecture is like, because it's probably not interesting or not important at that point of time. And if the interviewer is explicitly looking for architecture information, give them a chance to ask that question. So always read the room. See what information makes most sense, try to keep it concise, and most important of all, when you're talking about your resume, make sure that it matches the description that you've provided on the resume. So again, yeah, this also you could actually take few minutes of time before you even get to the interview, prepare for it, and and then based on the follow-up questions that are coming up in an interview, you can actually tailor your answers and provide a much comprehensive insight into how the project went on. So that is area number 2. So far we have tell me about yourself and the project areas covered. The third is any of the technical information. Any of the technical questions might come up. So this will depend on the skills on your resume and also whatever the scope of your experience that you have set forth in your tell me about yourself. So this could be about like theoretical questions like software development life cycles, or it could be about tools like Jira, or it could be about they might even like initiate a topic. There was this one interview that I was one of the members in the panel, and my colleague thought it was interesting to see how the person that we were interviewing would do in the future. So they wanted to strike a conversation, and they were asking him about virtualization and what he thought about virtualization. And we were really surprised, since this was not a question, this was simply we were asking his opinion on what he thought about virtualization. We got to know so much about this person and what his interests are, how he's oriented towards the future, and the potential of the DevOps culture and everything. So we immediately hired him. So sometimes interviews might not exactly be a question answer format. Sometimes it might be just initiation of a discussion and trying to understand your point of view, where you stand with in terms of research and development and stuff like that. So the third technical area is really pretty much open. They could ask you about boundary value analysis. They could ask you about any other technical areas. So as far as this class goes, we have pretty much covered most of the technical areas. Again, the scope of that remains to the manual testing or the core QA concepts. But if you are mentioning SQL, Unix, Java, or anything else on your resume, be sure to have your basics correct, and be sure to let your interviewer know the scope of your expertise on it. So Mr. Khan's question is, for Kar Guruji, what is the number of days we can mention for the project? So so each one of you have worked on it for the first 3 weeks of these classes. So you can mention 3 weeks. Or if you are still working on it, I mean, if you have taken longer to test it, then provide the approximate amount of time that you've taken. So is it necessary to add SQL? So that's something we'll take it at the end, because there are a lot of similar questions like that. So we'll talk about that in the end. So far we have 3 things covered. Tell me about yourself. We have the project related information, and then we have stuff that about the technical information. So Raj, we'll take that also. And then the fourth category of questions would be, have you faced any challenges and have you overcome them? So this is to understand, first of all, how do you work in a collaborative environment? So this is one of the things that we'll try to assess your attitude plus communication. So again, if you have worked in a project setup and you have faced some problems, you can just go ahead and mention them. But the common problems that testers face are, number one, lack of documentation. So this is actually one of the challenges that you all faced. This is one of the challenges that you all faced during Karguruji working when you were working on the Karguruji application. So lack of documentation is pretty much common for all projects across all teams. So this is something that we testers have to deal with. Now, if the question is how do you overcome it? You can actually overcome this by talking to the developers and business analysts outside the system and having your questions answered regularly, making sure that your understanding of the system is on the same page as the actual working on the system. So that's something you can say. Another common challenge that QA teams face is unstable QA environment. So we test thinking that the QA environment is all up and running, but something happens and down the line some changes, code changes would not be present in QA environment, which means all our testing goes waste. So unstable QA environment is also one of the challenges that we face, and for this also enhanced communication. So if you see, most of the challenges in a QA environment can be overcome by lot of interpersonal communications. So that's something that you can mention here also. And for unstable QA environment, you can say that we developed a checkpoint system where like a checklist, test readiness review checklist, and we kind of worked with it and made sure that the QA environment was stable before we even started. And then there is like time scale, yes, schedules overrunning, time not being sufficient, all those are issues. So in that case, you can say you followed the risk-based testing structures and you've come up with you've come up with a list of test cases that you need to focus on. So all of these are challenges and how you overcome them. Now here, one thing is, it is very easy to quickly mold a challenge-based question into place where you go ahead and spill your grievances. So don't let that happen. See, when somebody is asking you, hey, do you have a problem? It is a normal tendency to say, yeah, yes, I do have a problem. This is the problem A, B, and C. So don't go there. Don't do that. In an interview, one of the worst things that we can do for ourselves is talk about the negative things. So do not say anything negative about your previous company, previous boss, previous salary, previous project, previous process, previous team members. So no negatives basically. Do not talk about any negatives. So if the question is, why are you looking for a job change? Right? So when the question comes like, why are you looking for a job change? It is very easy to say, my previous job pretty much sucked and I hated going to work, and that's why I desperately want to get out of there. And that might be true in your case, but it is never wise to, word it that way. So forget about what's bad in your previous situation. Think about what's best in your new one. So if somebody asks you, why are you looking for a change, you can say something like, the new role I'm applying for has me excited for, these new challenges, and this is the kind of role I have been dreaming about. And since I have an opportunity to get that now, I'm looking for a change. But don't try to start your sentence by saying, the current job I've been doing it for 2 years and I'm pretty much gotten everything I need from there. That's a bad answer, because the companies don't want to hire somebody who will get whatever they can out of the company and leave when they have nothing else to learn. But that's how we are actually. We want to learn. We want to have a learning graph, which is not wrong. It's just that you want to take a diplomatic step here, and you want to present your choices in the best possible way. So since I was doing beta testing in my previous job, I wanted to change my job to QA. Now that is an ambiguous answer. So if I ask you what's wrong with beta testing, why are you looking for a change? So this is somehow indirectly conveying that beta testing was a bad option, and that is why you're looking for a change. So try to rephrase that. So try to, if you're applying for, say, a job that is not beta testing, you can say that this is a change of pace for me and this is what I want to explore. So don't mention beta testing had me, I've been doing that for a while and now I want to know. Try to phrase that in a different way. Your choice is completely right. We are, as individuals, completely justified with, the choices that we make. But to an interviewer, they are looking at the best interest of their company as well. So try to phrase that a little differently. Thank you, Mr. Khan. I hope that is true for you. So are you a team worker? It might not come as directly as that, the question. So they might ask you a question like, are there any situations where you were appreciated by your team members or you were appreciated by your boss? So here, we all have a love-hate relationship with the boss. More often, the hate relationship than love. So probably we will go ahead and say, my boss was, he never appreciated me for anything. He was really grumpy half the time. So it is easy to say that answer, but you know what? Don't do that. Just say that my boss was somebody who wasn't very expressive. So all he would say is thank you, and I kind of understood my contribution to the team. So try to keep it neutral. Try to be appreciative of all the people. And I'm not just saying this, just to say something in an interview. I'm not just, it's not that, we have to just say it for the sake of saying it in an interview, but still, nurture all those negative thoughts in our mind. But really, to be really successful in this corporate IT kind of a setup, it is very, very important to be that light person who does not carry a lot of, thoughts in our mind. So, at the end of the day, we are all here to make a career, build a career, make some money in the long run and everything. So keep it that way, keep it light, don't let things get to your head. This is why I don't actually, encourage fighting for your bugs and everything. See, we don't have to fight for the bug. The bug will fight for itself if it is serious enough. So nobody will try to actually, ignore a bug if it is really serious. So in that point, we should not let it become a personal battle of ours. So we have to really maintain that professional distance. And not, get aggressive or bitter at the end of the day. So yeah, that's challenges. And the next thing is the fifth question. Again, I'm not saying it will be exactly phrased in this way. What are your strengths and weaknesses? They might not exactly ask you this way. So they might ask you like, why should I hire you? So if you were me, would you hire yourself? So this is the sort of questions that you might hear. And sometimes these questions are asked by your technical interviewer, or the other times these questions, they come up in your HR round. So whichever way they happen, these questions are coming for sure. So strengths and weaknesses, again, for this question also you do have a time to prep, and also here give an answer that is, really about you, because as Mr. Mohyuddin has said, he's a team player, quick learner, he likes challenges. So that is really about him. So if there's something that you think you're good at, find the words to express that. So a lot of times we know we are good at something. It's just that that word does not come to our mind. So sit down, work with, a mentor or a friend or a team member, sometimes your spouse. So work it out. You just have to coax those words out of your mind a little bit. Once you find the right words, make sure that you are, presenting them in the best light possible. So the strengths can be anything. There was one team member of mine. She was extremely creative. She would write the bug reports. She would write the, test cases in a way that was so efficient, at the same time extremely creative. So her strength, in my opinion, was really, really her creativity. So creativity might not really count for a lot when we are talking about, something that is completely IT, technical and stuff like that. But, when you are able to justify why you think something is your strength, there's nothing better than that. So each one of you have that inbuilt strength in yourself. Find it, find the right words to describe it. And when you do, be sure to stand by it. And the next one is weaknesses. Now, this is something that I would, again, tell you to take a diplomatic stand on again. So when somebody asks you what is your weakness, Yeah, we want to be totally honest, but it is never a good idea to. I mean, for one, see, if you've met a total stranger, you wouldn't tell them the bad things about you. You would only confide into someone who you really trust. So at this point of time, the interviewer is pretty much a stranger to you. So at some point, if that stranger interviewer becomes your boss and you're finding some problems, while working, that might be a time to go to your boss and say, hey, this is my problem, I want to work on it, how do we figure this out? But this person is still a stranger to you. So at this point of time, it's not a good idea to confide in your weaknesses. So at this point of time, take a diplomatic way. Now, yeah, tell your weakness in a way that it sounds like a strength. So when this question comes to me, I always tell them that, when I do reviews, I kind of come out like a monster because I keep telling people, do the, write grammatically correct sentences and do the spell check. I mean, it makes my team looks at me like I'm a freak, but that's what it is. I mean, each one of us really do have this kind of weaknesses. One guy, he told me that he always gets into trouble at home because he works late, that because he's a workaholic. So find what it is about you that it is, not taken in the best possible light by people around you, but you personally believe in it, and it might be slightly, a little bit of a pain to follow through it, but you will still, you always still do it. Another thing, my weakness, if I had to tell somebody, I always arrive on meetings on time and I end up waiting for the other people to join in, and that is completely frustrating for me. So find what it is about you and present that. Be very confident though. Yeah, these are few things. And then another question might be like, how long do you plan on staying in this job, or how much salary do you want? All of these, stay on a neutral ground. Don't commit and say that, I'm going to stay here forever as long as this project fails and all, all of that. So try not to commit to a timeline. Just say that, bring your sense of humor here, just laugh it off and say, as long as you'll have me, or as long as it takes, something non-committal. Do not commit to a certain salary figure, do not commit to a certain number of years that you're going to work for a company, all of those things. So try to stay on a neutral ground on that. So these are pretty much the 5 areas of questions that you'll get. Now, Mr. Khan's answer is, my weakness is I work like agile on waterfall model. That's a good one, but then you might have to explain what you mean, if you can give any examples and all that. So in an interview, avoid follow-up questions. That's the worst thing, because again, this is something that we all should try and avoid, but in an interview, people get competitive. The interviewer does get competitive. Even if you answer everything correct, they want to see that one question where you cannot. I mean, I wish all the interviewers did not feel that compulsion to, feel better, but they do. It is true, and it is especially true if you're applying for an automation role. Automation testers, I think, have the biggest attitude issues. Again, I'm going on record saying this, but again, I think I must speak my mind when I'm, in the class. So I think automation testers have the biggest, issue complex when it comes to interviewing. So they really want to give you a complicated problem, see you write the code, correct syntax. So this kind of situations exist. So in an interview, it is better to, try not to outsmart your interviewer. At the same time, keep it neutral, keep it simple. Not too many questions, not too many follow-up answers. So that's something that I would, those are the 5 broad areas of questions that you can expect. So for all the technical related questions, you can check out our blog, Software Testing Help. There are literally a few, I think, I myself have written 7 to 10 articles on interviews. So there are lots of other authors who have contributed interview-related questions and everything. So be sure to check that out. And the rest of the thing, if you see, the tell me about yourself question, the project-related question, the strengths and weaknesses, the challenges, all of these things you have time to prepare ahead. So in an interview, if you see, as much of it is spontaneous and, answers based on the questions that are coming, a lot of it can be orchestrated, beforehand. You can actually prepare, you can actually decide how to set the tone for an interview and go prepared. So take that time, in addition to preparing a resume, sit down and think about, these few commonly asked questions that you might get and how you will approach answering them. So that's all I have. Again, I have my PPT, which will just have few things. We'll just go over each one of them, and once that's done, we are pretty much done. So any questions, feel free to have them ready. We'll take all of them after we are done with this. First thing, be prepared. Again, I don't have to tell you all this. I'm sure we're all professionals, and we're all going to, of course, be prepared. But one thing that I find, in addition to all the things like, being on time, getting appropriately dressed, showing up on time. If it is a telephonic interview, making sure that you have a quiet room to take the interview from. All of these are, part of preparation, and be sure that you take an interview seriously and follow the right etiquette that is required for an interview. And in addition to that, you can actually, when you're attending an in-person interview, try to take your resume, copy of your resume, a hard copy of your resume along with you. Sometimes the interviewers are not as prepared as we expect them to be, and in that case you can avoid a lot of frustration by carrying a copy of your resume. And set the right tone. So what I mean by this is, remember that every job opening or opportunity that you have is an equal opportunity situation, which means we are all in a mutually beneficial situation. As much as you need the job, the company also needs somebody to fill a position to perform a certain, task for them. So when a person offers you a job, they are not doing a charity for you, nor are you doing a charity for them in return when you are, taking up their position. So maintain an appropriate level of interest, but do not be too desperate nor be too distant. So maintain that appropriate level of interest and, be prepared, set the right tone. But again, try not to go into a mode where, you are really extremely nervous and you just want the job at any cost. Again, nervousness is normal for anybody. It is pretty much inevitable. Everybody feels nervous in an interview, no matter how experienced they are. But it is all about, camouflaging that nervousness, finding that composure, being extremely confident. And then the tell me about yourself question, we talked about it. And the resume project experience, we talked about that as also. Be crisp and clear, don't go on and on. This is really my personal experience. I had a job that I pretty much had the job because it was my friend's recommendation. Everything was going fine. I actually did not even want the job, but the role sounded so good. I thought, let me give it a try. But my mistake was I went there on a day that was completely jet lagged. I traveled way too far. By the time I got there, I was totally breathless, and I was totally focused on just answering something to a question. I just talked. I had no idea what I talked. I mean, frankly, I wouldn't have hired myself. So if for some reason you are not able to be totally 100% present in an interview, reschedule. Be very clear and concise in your answers, because that will avoid the follow-up questions, and you are not just keeping on talking without any pauses. Again, be relevant. So what I mean by this is, it is completely okay for the person getting interviewed to ask a question to the interviewer, but you really have to know who to ask what and when. So if you're asking a question to your technical manager, ask them about how the project is going on, what phase is it, what is your role going to be, and things like that. But if you're talking to an HR manager, you can ask questions about the salaries and what kind of leave system they have, all of those. But if you ask the questions to the wrong people, then you're clearly not going to get any answers. So try and be relevant and all that. And what are you bringing to the table? So this is about, companies don't hire you based on your history. So how they say resume is your history and interview is trying to understand your future. So companies don't normally hire you based on what you've done. If that was the case, none of the freshers would ever get a job because they have never done anything, related to the experience. So it's all about the potential of what you can bring to the company. So a lot of times we have a lot of interests. So we have a lot of interests, personal pursuits that can be extremely beneficial to the company. So when I was hired into, one of my startup companies, I was a beginner QA engineer, and slowly, based on my interest in literature, writing and everything, I became a technical writer. Then I started writing, like proposals and everything. I went into the point of sales. So there's a certain level of evolution to every person as a career, as a professional. So whatever is your interest, what is that you can really add in terms of, what is it that you can bring to the table? So showcase your potential. This is the area to do that. I mean, this is the opportunity to do that in an interview. So if you have learned any skill by yourself in the past, this is something you might want to tell. I'm a quick learner, I'm a self-learner, that sort of thing and all that. And also the other example I gave you, we were talking to this person about virtualization, and we were really surprised by how much of a depth of interest he had in the subject. So somebody with that level of interest is definitely going to research that, bring a lot of his research findings into the company, so which can be extremely great for the company. So that kind of questions you can expect, and always try to, if you have a passion, if you are exploring something, be sure to focus on that, and try to find the right things that you want to focus in there. And then let the bygones be gone. Again, no negatives about the past, no negatives about boss or anything. And again, I don't know is not a bad answer. So a lot of times we think that when we keep on, again, if you go on saying I don't know for every question, that is clearly bad. But here and there, if they ask you of something and you don't know the answer, it's okay to say I don't know. There was this one interview when I asked one of the person who was attending, do you know what a BCP is? And that person, it was really weird actually. There was a real expansion to BCP that was not even closely related to IT, and that person talked about it for like 10 minutes, and it was really, I really did not get an opportunity to break that conversation, ask another question. So don't do that. If you don't know what BCP stands for, ask for confirmation. So are you talking about the business continuity plan? So ask for confirmation. So if they are looking for an answer about BCP, go ahead and give your answer. But if you don't know anything about it, just say I've never heard about it. Sorry, I don't know. It's okay to do that. And friending outside. Now this is something that I've been intending to take it out, but I don't know. A lot of job gurus, like job search gurus, have been these days recommending that you friend your interviewer outside in a professional LinkedIn-like network or Facebook or something like that. But again, do what is consistent with your personality. If you are the kind of person who easily connects with people, and if this is the sort of thing that you do, then go ahead and connect with them. But if you are somebody who don't do it, I mean who doesn't do it normally, who is you would rather have them friend you or something like that, then avoid it. So do what is consistent with your personality. Try not to force yourself into doing something just because it will be beneficial for the job. That's important to remember. Yeah, so that's about it. That's all I have. I hope this session was useful in any, in at least a little extent. So I do see a lot of questions. So let me take the questions first in the chat window, and then we'll use the Excel sheet, and then I'll take your questions. So what if the BA is not responding? So is that so do you think that's a question that you will get asked, Meera? So let me know on that, we'll see. So what is the extent of help from you or STH? Now we are available to help you anytime. As we said, we have a 100% email answering policy. But having said that, sometimes with new batches that come up, we might not answer your emails as promptly. And my policy is when students do their homework and come back to us with questions, we are here to help. But if you expect the topic or the drive to come from our end, that is not possible, because we cannot give a tailor-made solution to everyone, and we cannot give a solution. So one example I'll give you is, if you write your resume, a copy at least, a version of it at least, and send it to me, I'll review and send it back. But sometimes I've had requests where they give me the skill set and tell me to write the resume. That's not happening. So we are here to help. We are here to answer any questions that you might have, but the drive has to come from you. What is it that you need help from us for, and all that. But absolutely, we are here to help anytime you need. Database testing. Is learning SQL? Yes. If you learn SQL, that's pretty good for database testing. What about the body language? Again, stay true to who you are. See, they keep telling you that don't fold your hands, or don't put your hands, or don't put your elbows on the table and all that. But I would say, first of all, think about the kind of company that you're going for an interview. Some companies are very, very formal. Some are very, very casual. I found myself working at a major American clothes client on my first day wearing a suit and complete business attire, where everybody else were in shorts and flip-flops. So you see, sometimes it is very important to understand the culture of the company. So some companies are very, very casual, which means they don't care even if you sit with your feet up on the table. I'm not recommending that you do, but even if you do, they really don't. It doesn't matter to them. So body language, again, as I said, stay true to who you are. If you're comfortable with your elbows on the table, go for it. Whatever it is, it's about you being comfortable there, at the same time being respectful. So when you are you, I don't think that is disrespectful of anybody. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Now again, this is a question that only you can answer. So where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself, going into automation testing? Do you see yourself becoming a test lead? Do you see yourself becoming a business analyst? What is it that you see? What kind of career targets that you have? So think about this also. For any suggestions for the cover letter? So actually we do have a cover letter sample on our site. So let me just quickly show you that. So cover letter is something that you would normally send out along with your resume when you are applying for an interview. So this is like you're introducing yourself in the email in 1 or 2 lines. So this is how you can write it. My name, my qualification, your 1 or 2 lines in your skill set, and the context of why you are emailing them, and what is it that they can find in your where they can find much more information, and your name and contact. So it can be as simple as that. Now a lot of times, again, lot of people create more than one cover notes, and they kind of juggle around them. I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but if you can do that, if you're comfortable juggling multiple cover notes, and depending on who you are sending it to and all that, do that. But if you are like me and you cannot manage all of them, just have one, change it, or update it as it is required for the job that you're applying, and you can just work with one. Do we need to practice UFT for applying for manual testing jobs? See, any skill is not bad to have. So if you are going to learn UFT, that's not bad to have, definitely. But do you have to? There is no answer to that. It's up to you. If you want to really, of course, automation, I will say this though, automation is definitely useful. Automation is definitely part of the future of all QA projects. So it's something that you might want to orient yourself with and, work on it a little bit. But do you need it? You may or you may not, depending on the role that you're looking for. Mr. Khan, I'm yet to take a look at your resume. Usually resumes and scheduling one-on-one sessions, I do it after the batch is done, because that way I don't have any conflicts. That way we have everything that we talked about, and you also have an opportunity to update it. But I will get back to your resume in a day or two. Thank you. But for an interview, it's advisable to be formally dressed. You know what they say for an interview about the dress? They tell you that you have to dress like one level more formally than you would normally dress for your work every day. So if every day you dress in like, just a casual, a normal business attire, like a shirt and regular, pants. So on an interview, you probably want to wear a tie. So one level above the formality. Is it necessary to have a LinkedIn account before applying for a job? It is good to have one, because people are these days, social networking is big, professional networking is big also. Whether or not it is necessary, LinkedIn is also one good source to find jobs. So it is definitely not a qualification to apply for a job, but probably you'll have a much more exposure if you create yourself a LinkedIn account. How important is a cover letter? So if you're applying through DICE or Indeed or any of those online portals, usually you do have an option to include a cover letter. So for some jobs it's mandatory, some it's not. So it's not a big deal even if it is. So it's just few lines about you. What sites will you suggest to find jobs? Mm, that's a tough one. I normally check DICE and Indeed, and when you are looking for jobs, I would say don't leave any of the sources unexplored. So all the sources, sometimes, as I said, one of my students in UK have found a job through by checking in his local library for any openings. So don't leave any option. So here you see all the sources. So one is friends, let your friends know. Online forums like this is, I'm talking about like Craigslist or something, but I would tell you to be extremely careful when you're applying for jobs on portals like Craigslist or Suleka. And then the social networking sites like LinkedIn, extremely useful. Job portals, Indeed, Naukri, Dice, Monster, all of these are good sites. Check the newspapers, online classifieds, company sites. So anything. So if you say, for example, you want to work at Google, so check their company site, register for job alerts, all of that. So don't leave any stone unturned. So Raj, you wanted more information on database testing. So here's what I'll do. There is also articles on our site. I'll send you the links to that. You might want to check that. Mr. Mohyuddin, that is true actually. It is not about what you know, but it is about whom you know that matters a lot. That is true, but the point is, see, here's the deal. We don't have a lot of contacts most of the times. At least I don't. Anytime I'm looking for a job, I have to go through the regular sources. So again, not all people are, into the world of, so what I will say is trust your skills. So do some market research, see how the market is going on. So if you're really good at what you do, there is no reason why you cannot get a job or will not get a job. And also, with job search, I know this is not any useful information, but this is the mindset that I like to keep when I'm looking for a job. It is not about whether or not I'll find a job or whether or not you will find a job, because we all know that we are going to find a job. But the question that really bothers us is, when will we find a job? We want it to be now. We want it to be this minute. So if you can just for a minute shift the focus from when and work on the skills, I think the job will just come. So put your resumes in every forum that you can, and if you don't have some context, see, some things we cannot change, like where we live, the time of the year, or we cannot change what kind of friends we have, or what kind of contacts we know or we don't know. So these are factors that we really cannot change. So work with the factors that you can, which is your skill set. Work with the factors that you can change, that is your resume. How can you make it better? What online forums can you go ahead and place it, and update your resume at least once a week in all these forums, because the most recently updated resumes have most views basically. So it is great that you have contacts, but if you don't let that be a problem to you. So that's something I really want to put it out there. And also at the end of an interview, you will have to remember that even though you've done everything right, the job still might not be yours, because a lot of dynamics play a prominent role here. Somebody else might be willing to work cheaper. Somebody else might be, living closer, which means there's a local candidate, and all that. So there are lots of dynamics that play a role in whether or not we get a job. So you might be a really worthy candidate giving all the right answers, but sometimes jobs just don't happen. So don't worry about when. Just focus on how you can be better. And some things we cannot change. A lot of times we blame, where we live. We sometimes, I've had, participants apply for a job in the months of October and November, and they blame the holidays because we're so desperate to get the job that day. But can we change the calendar? Can we just do something and move it to February? There's nothing we can do about it. So those things, just get an objective look about it. It is very hard to stay motivated during job search because it's one of the most trying and very difficult times. But yeah, just try to stay positive. And what about updating every week? That means, if you have acquired a new skill set over the week, go ahead and put that in your resume and in your online profile. So that's how you can, keep it current, and that's how you can actually revisit your profile, make it better, do it at least on a weekly basis. And also during job search, one of the mistakes that we do is we sit all day on these online job portals looking for this, looking for that. I mean, of course, if that works for you, that's great. But I myself, if I'm looking for a job, I only do it for an hour a day. I only apply for jobs, say, first thing in the morning, and the rest of the day I work on my skills. So just because we are applying for jobs, that doesn't mean we are going to get the jobs. We have to work towards it. So applying job is just one portion of it. But, being able to stand up to that application and being able to be like skill wise ready to that job application is the next part. So this will take a lot of time, and this is what you need to focus more on. So they are mentioning, okay, so there are lots of skills that jobs mention, and we talked about this in the resume section. So if you're satisfying anywhere between 75 to 80% of the skills that they mention, you can apply for the job. So if you're expecting, let's say these are the 85% of the skills. In addition to that, if you have like PHP, Ruby, Unix, Linux. So if they're asking these, this will fall into the 15%. So if you're very confident on this 85% skill, go ahead and apply. You don't need to know this. But if it is a job where Ruby is, mandatory, then, don't apply for the job. See, for all the jobs that you are seeing where you are not qualified, you'll find that many for which you are qualified. So focus on the ones that you are qualified indeed. And also, when you're searching in the job portal, don't just search for QA engineer, because this is how you might refer to your role, but the company might refer to it in a different way. They might refer to it as functional tester. They might refer to it as just tester. Some companies might call it test engineer. So there are all of these different titles. So when you are searching for jobs in the online job portals, use different names, use different combinations. Or you might want to use manual tester, which is the term that we loathe, but we never know that the company will not use that word. So yeah, go ahead and use all of these different titles, and I'm sure a lot of them will come up. So I'm just going to take all the questions from here, but in any case, if you have more, feel free to put them here. Do I need Unix or Linux proficiency? So this again depends. If you are looking for a Linux or Unix job, then you definitely do. But if it belongs to one of those good to have or the 15% of skills, you can ignore. What level of Java knowledge do I have to gain? You will have to, so if you are looking at Java knowledge to work on Selenium or something, then you should have enough Java knowledge to make Selenium work for you. So working knowledge, that is enough. So practical working knowledge is good enough. Is there any requirement for Apache Tomcat or WebLogic? So if you're asking me, are there jobs for this? Yes, absolutely. But do we need to know this? Are there jobs for a QA plus this kind of skills? Maybe, because every skill is useful. So sometimes there might be, but honestly, I haven't seen more of those. How often do you use these kind of applications like Apache Tomcat and WebLogic? As testers, not that often. What kind of Linux commands do I have to use and how often? Again, you don't have to use Linux commands always, but if you want to learn few Linux commands, there are actually articles on our site again, so you might want to check that out. And how many months of years of experience do I have to mention? So this is something. So if you do not have any prior QA experience and you're practicing on your own, you have learned the skills by yourself, and in that case, how many years of experience do you put in? I would say don't put in the experience at all. Just focus on the skills. Apply for the job without mentioning the years of experience. That can be done. So write your resume in a way that you focus more on the skills and not on the years of experience. And if you want to know how, I would say start writing your resume, send me a copy of it when you have a certain version, and we can work on that. Can you please let me know what type of jobs I can apply after this training? So you can apply for a manual tester, functional tester, or a junior tester, all of these roles. So anything that you need, so to be a successful manual tester, anything that uses the skills that you have learned in this class, then you can definitely apply for those jobs. And do I need any more training? Now this is something I'll leave it to you, because everybody learns at their own pace. There are students who learn, in parallel when the class is happening, but there are some who catch up later. So if you have been, working in parallel, and if you feel confident about all of this, you can go ahead and start applying for manual tester jobs. But if you want to apply for a QTP job or a database tester job, clearly you need more training. So it depends on what kind of job you're applying for. And if you know how the job market is, no, actually job market actually, you know what, I've had a lot of students in UK get jobs. However, I don't know exactly what area of UK that is. But at this point of time, I really don't know how the market is. But as I said, people have been getting jobs. So I'm assuming it's okay. But again, this depends on where you live and all that. So I don't know. Just check out your local listings, see how you feel about it, and send me an email if you need any further help on this. Yes, you can send me your resume anytime after the classes are done. You don't have to do it right away. I have done a project in my project management module. Can I include that in your resume? Absolutely, if that is relevant to IT and the QA position that you're applying for. Sure. This is the first time I'm doing QA, just an introduction before I apply or make my resume. And practice, how can I do it? Should it be more theory or practicing? It should be a mix of both, I feel, because if you see, for example, yesterday's session on QTP, I don't recommend starting working on QTP based on what we saw yesterday, because we didn't talk about what an add-in is, we didn't talk about what an object is. We kind of did not have a theoretical foundation to get into it, because the intention of that class was to just show you how automation works real time. So without the theoretical foundation, I feel that we somehow learn the steps, but we miss grasping the meaning of what we are trying to achieve with that step. So whenever you're learning something, try to do a little bit of theory and then follow it up with practice. Okay. Yeah, I think I got my. Okay, you should be able to hear me now. Can you all hear me? Okay, there was some problem, with GoToTraining, clearly, as always. Sorry about that, team. So I took all of your questions from here, but if there's anything else, so Linux commands and database testing, check it out here actually. So are there any questions I missed out answering? But here also you will find commands and all those, which is pretty much what you will have. What skills will you suggest to add on as a QA? I will definitely suggest SQL skills and some sort of programming language skills. Is it VB scripting, whether it's VB scripting, Java, some sort of a programming skill. Yeah, Dita, I already sent the video recording for HPQC. Do you want me to resend it? So SQL, Java programming, that is what I would say to begin with. Other than that, I don't think much. For manual testing, it depends actually. As I said, you will have to keep on updating your skills going forward. So yeah, if you want to update that, then you can do that. So QTP, yes, absolutely. If you are, some sort of programming language, and all that. So QTP, yeah, it depends on your interest actually. So we all have a graph to actually go ahead and design our career in any way you want. So if you want to venture into automation testing, then absolutely QTP. Familiarizing means learning, acquainting, just understanding high level, like where is what and all of that. So the course completion certificate, so any questions that you will have after this session about course completion certificates or video accesses, all of that, you will have to get in touch with Vijay, because he's more like the administrator. But if it is about the subject, resumes, interviews, then you will have to get in touch with me. So send an email to Vijay. He will respond and he will send you the course completion certificate. The only reason he might not have sent you yet is because the course wasn't completed really. So I'm sure he's going to send it to you shortly. Otherwise, just send another email, CC me, I'll be sure to remind him. So Deepta, yes, after this class, I'll send you the QC link one more time. So will I help you if I find any vacancy? Actually, that never happened. Me finding a vacancy has never happened so far. But if it does, absolutely. So I find it interesting, but can I? Yes, yes, you can actually, start looking for a manual tester's job, and then you can learn in parallel. You can do that. So taking class on the subject means familiarizing. So taking class on the subject means, yeah, very first thing that you do is familiarizing. So if I come to Microsoft PowerPoint and if I'm just, trying to understand how this works, I might not know the in-depth knowledge yet. So I'll just see that, in the insert, I can insert a picture. So at this point, I probably don't know how, but I know that I can, do a picture insert and all that. So getting a basic understanding is familiarizing. Do you give references? Yes, we give references only to the extent that you have attended our session for so-and-so period and that you worked on the live project for 3 weeks time. So that's a reference that we can provide. So taking class on the university, no, that would be learning. That would be, no, that wouldn't be familiarizing. Anything that is in-depth is much more than becoming familiar. You're learning, you're knowing. So do you have any questions for me? Yes. In fact, we have an article on STH on that also. So you can ask them questions. You can ask them questions about the project. You can ask them questions. Let me quickly show you. So project related questions. So here you can ask, what is my role going to be? Is this a new position? What is the project about? And what are the tools are you using? Who are you going to report to? What is the organization structure and all that? You can ask culture related questions like, what's the dress code? What kind of a work environment can you expect? And then you can ask about what are the next steps in the interview process. Here's the link. And when am I expected to start? So this is basically to understand whether the interview is going well or not. So is there something that you need from me, like references and all that? So you can also ask, like, at the end of your interview, what kind of career growth I can get, how long the company has been in business, all of that you can ask as well. So when will my first paycheck come? Actually, that's not a bad question. A lot of people are interested because payrolls, the running of payroll has like weird schedules. So sometimes even if you join on a certain day, you will not get it and you will get it sometime else. So yeah, that's a good question to ask. Anything else, team? Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Mr. Khan. Thanks so much. So yes, as I said earlier, please feel free to stay in touch with us. Anytime you have a question, I'm here, Vijay is here, and we have 100% email answering policy, which means whether you are a current batch student, previous batch student, whoever you are, we will definitely address your questions. And be sure to share your success stories with us. I'm sure it's all in the near future. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Yes, Meera, you can ping me anytime. Thanks, everyone. That's very encouraging. So again, that brings us to the next thing. Any feedback you have, positive or negative, definitely let Vijay know and let him know how we're doing about it. Great. I like the optimism, Raj. And yep. And let me know when you do that. How is your trainer success so far, if it's possible? I'm not sure. Thank you, Sneha. So are you asking me about how successful is this training has been for our students? So if we are talking about, the success parameters for our students, there are lots of our students who stay in touch with us till this day, and I'm very proud to say that we have 100% pass rate when it comes to ISTQB. I mentioned this before, and I must tell you, we have a lot of our students work in real-time projects right now. I wish there was a forum, where all our previous, students could communicate, but in fact, but I'm going to be honest with you, it takes at least 3 months of dedicated hard work to really get there. So a lot of students have done that. Actually, in fact, the other day, in fact, 2 or 3 days back, I heard from one of my UK students say that he's gotten a job and it took him 3 months to actually work and find it. So but we do have a lot of success rate. Thanks everyone. Thanks for all the encouragement. Actually, I'm in LinkedIn as well. I'm a recent joiner. So just look for me, Swati Sila, in LinkedIn. If you would like, we can connect and, stay in touch. Has anyone appeared for ISTQB certification? So in the class, I don't know. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moyuddin. Actually, that's one of the things, with our class, more than our